back in the East Bay Circle and working with someone that I know and familiar with. So Darryl, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Robert. Hello, everybody. My name is Darryl, and I am the lead realtor and a licensed broker associate with Advent Properties. We are a property management firm based in Oakland. However, we cover the entire East Bay. We actually cover a wider swath than that. We go down as far as Santa Cruz and all the way into Sacramento. And we are what I like to call a boutique type property management brokerage, as well as a boutique type brokerage for sales. Just a little bit about me. I've been with the company for over 5 years. I am a licensed broker associate through the California Department of Real Estate. I am also a CCRM certified. Our company manages over 900 units. We deal primarily with single family homes and smaller buildings. We do have a couple larger buildings, so we have a good background in what it takes to be a property manager. One of my specialties is tenant occupied sales. So the laws are very different in California, especially in rent controlled areas, and now AB 1482 controlled areas when it comes to selling a property that is tenant occupied. So if you have questions about that, feel free to message me later on. I myself own rental property, and I have for about 15 plus years. I self-managed it for a long time, and now I've have my team help me manage those properties. And in the last year, even under COVID conditions, I've helped my clients buy and sell over $20 million worth of real estate by myself. So that's just a little bit about me, so you have a little bit of background. Today's agenda is very similar to what I did about a year ago in March when we kicked off this webinar series with RHA. The first topic is going to be, why should I hire a property manager, a professional property manager? Second topic is going to be questions to ask the potential property manager. Third is going to be what you need to know if you want to manage the property yourself. The next one is going to be new laws. And then lastly, I'm going to give you some additional webinar opportunities. So let's kick this off. Why do most people not hire a property manager? First and foremost, they don't have a clear understanding of what a property manager actually does. They're worried about costs, or they're doing this as a hobby. Here are some reasons why I feel and that it would be beneficial to hire a property manager. First and foremost, property management is complicated and ever-changing, and that's only gotten more true under COVID-19 regulations. Property management requires a ton of knowledge to stay within the law. It requires someone that's pleasant but firm, communicative, but not aggressive, very detail-oriented, very organized, calm but not apathetic, truthful but does not overshare, someone that's always learning and not arrogant, someone that's very knowledgeable because the laws are ever changing and you are subject to local, state, and federal laws, and someone that is consistent in serving the appropriate notices and serving them timely. So here's the 25 questions that you should ask. Here's the 25 questions you should ask if you want to hire a property manager. First and foremost, is your firm licensed to do property management? Do you have any certifications? A professional third-party property management firm is licensed through the California Department of Real Estate. We are a licensed brokerage, and as such, we are held to a higher standard than mom and pop landlords. We are regulated as well as audited on a regular basis to make sure that we have your best interest in mind and are serving your interest legally and professionally. Another good question is, how long have they been around? Do you want someone that has some experience, has some knowledge? If their firm hasn't been around for a long time, ask how long they've personally been managing properties in order to get an understanding of their skill level. What makes your firm different from the competition? This is probably the best question that you can ask any property manager. And there's different philosophies. Each company has their own philosophy about what makes them special. It can be a compartmentalized approach where you have separate property managers, separate maintenance managers, separate accounting, and separate leasing managers. Or it can be portfolio where one person handles all aspects of your property. Both have their pluses and minuses. Feel free to ask your potential property manager what style they have and why they've chosen that style. Another great question is, how many properties do you currently manage? Are they managing a small number of properties? Are they a super large company? Do you want to be another number, or do you want that hands-on approach? That's a good question to ask, and something that changes for each individual owner on what they actually want. A great question, very simple. Do you manage in my area? Laws are very different city to city, county to county. Some property management firms focus on one specific city or one specific area. Other management firms have a wider swath that they cover. So that's a good question. Number 7, how do you set rental rates? For us personally, what we do is we do a comparable rental analysis. We present a couple $100 range, and ultimately we let the owners decide on what to set the rent at. You as the landlord, you as the owner, you ultimately get to choose that. However, what we advise is that you take our advice, because we're going to give you that professional opinion to get the property rented out and rented out in a timely manner. The next question, number 8, is how do you handle move-in and move-out procedures? How much is the security deposit, and who holds the security deposit? This can change and has changed for us. As far as move-in and move-out procedures, we do a detailed move-in and move-out procedure where we take photos and text of every single room with the resident present and present this to them, and they actually sign off on it. We do a detailed move-in inspection, so when they do move out, we can compare the move-in to move-out and deduct anything beyond normal wear and tear from their security deposit. As far as security deposit goes, standard practice used to be 1 full month's rent. That's kind of changed under COVID. And the reason being, there is so much vacancy that to make your property more attractive, sometimes we're advising owners to do a lower security deposits, sometimes as low as $500, sometimes half a month's rent. It lowers that entry threshold and makes it easier for tenants to rent your property. It also sets your property apart from other properties that are available out there. And then lastly, who holds the security deposit? That's a case-by-case basis with the companies. Advent Properties holds the security deposit in a non-interest-bearing trust account. And that way, when the residents do vacate, we have 21 days to issue an itemized disposition and refund the security deposit. So we take care of all of that for you and for your tenants. A good question to ask, and probably the one that's the most common to ask, is what is your fee structure? Is it a set base fee? Is it percentage based? Is there a fee for leasing? What does your fee cover? That varies company to company. I would say depending on the number of units you have can also affect what the fee is that's charged. Advent Properties charges a percentage, and we have a property management fee and we have a leasing fee, meaning when this property is vacant, there's no management fee, but there is a leasing fee. If you have more questions about that specifically, feel free to reach out to me. All my contact information will be provided at the end, and then it's on the slides that you'll be receiving via email. A good question is, how do you send reports? How often can I see a sample? The reports can include owner statements for what's happened that month, what charges, how much rent was collected, what bills were paid, and then what the final balance is. We at Advent Properties use a property management software called Appfolio, and we have access to about 25 different reports. So we can get reports that are most beneficial to you. Do you take properties that are already tenant occupied? This is a good question. And for us, it's this is a case-by-case basis. In general, yes, we take properties that are already tenant occupied, and we do a lease review and a property inspection when we take on these properties to make sure that your lease addendums are most current with all the local, state, and federally required addendums, as well as the current condition of the property when we take over management. That's just best practices. So we know the condition as well as when and if the tenant vacates, how much further wear and tear or damage is done to the unit after we started managing. Question number 12 is, how are potential tenants screened? This is the most critical question you can ask any property manager, particularly under COVID conditions. The qualification standards are so important. You want to get highly qualified individuals in your space that are going to pay the rent because there is an eviction moratoria in Alameda County and statewide because of the COVID-19 emergency order. So you want to have those high standards and get quality tenants in there that are going to take good care of your property, but who are also going to pay your rent. Things to ask is, what kind of credit score? What are the income requirements? Do you accept people with evictions? Those are some general questions that you should ask a property manager about qualification standards and tenant screening. Question number 13, how do you advertise vacant rentals? What are your qualifications? For Advent properties, we advertise on approximately 28 different websites, including Craigslist and our own website. We update those websites 3 times a week, so we stay on top of all the listings. Everyone that is interested in a property physically has to tour one of the properties with one of our leasing assistants. We do not allow people to apply sight unseen. That is our first qualification standard. Our other qualification standards is a set credit score, a set income requirement based on the number of people applying, no past due collections, no evictions. We verify prospective tenants' employment. We verify their rental history. We verify their income. We want to make sure that anyone living in your property and that we are managing is highly qualified to protect us and to protect you. Question number 14 is, can I see a sample of your management agreement, of your lease? Any property manager should not have a problem with this. I send those out to prospective clients all the time. That way you can see exactly what we're going to cover. We use a standard California Apartment Association and CAR, California Association of Realtors Property Management Agreement. We've also added on additional addendums to better protect you and your property. As far as our lease goes, we use the standard California Apartment Association lease, and our average lease is between 60 and 70 pages, depending on the city for the property. These are all digitally signed, so it's COVID safe. We countersign on your behalf as an agent of the owner, and then we do a detailed move-in inspection when we move the tenants in. So you have access to all of those. Question number 15 is, who handles maintenance work? Is there 24/7 support? This is probably the most critical question, or one of the most critical questions you can ask a property manager. We at Advent Properties have a 24/7 maintenance contact phone number. It's staffed by a live person 24 hours a day. That way, when your tenants call, even in the middle of the night, they can get a hold of a live person. Our team member is trained to assess the situation, see if they can help resolve it over the phone. Is it flipping a circuit breaker? Is it unjamming a garbage disposal? Something simple, so we don't need to send anyone out. If it's not that, they assess and see if it's emergency and we need to send someone out right then and there, or if it can wait till the following morning or the following business day. And that, like I said, that's available 24/7. We also have the ability for the tenants to submit maintenance requests online. They can either email them into our unified email address, or through their online portal, they can submit a maintenance request, work order. They can actually then track the status of that work order and see updates live as we're doing work and assigning it to vendors. Next question is, how is rent collected? What forms of payment do you accept? And this, again, varies by property manager. We at Advent Properties collect rent on the 1st. It's late after the 5th. We collect rent via check, money order, cashier's check, or online portal, where they link it directly to their checking account. We do not accept credit cards and we do not accept cash. And that's the credit cards is because they're costly, and the cash is because we want the accountability. And it's easier to track if it's in a money order, cashier's check, or regular check. Question number 17. How frequently is your lease updated? What is the standard term for your lease? Our lease is updated at least annually. We always use the most current CAA lease and addendums. And if addendums or lease changes are made throughout the year, we update the lease that we use live. And then as far as a standard term for our lease, most professional property managers do at least a 1-year term. However, for us, we do not like leases that end in November, December, January, or February, and that's for your benefit. We don't want leases to end in those months because those are the slowest rental periods to re-rent out your space. So by having a slightly longer or slightly shorter term lease, put you in a better rental period. I typically advise for a little bit longer because spring is a better time to start advertising your property when it becomes vacant. Spring and summer, as you're probably already aware, are the busiest rental seasons. Do you renew the lease annually? Benefits of a month-to-month. We at Advent Properties recommend that you do a fixed term lease for that first year, at least. After that, there's more benefits to you as the landlord to do a month-to-month. A lot of properties in our jurisdiction are covered under the just cause ordinances of each of the various cities. So there's really no benefit to you as a landlord to do another fixed term lease. If there's changes that need to be made because of local, state, or federal changes, with a month-to-month lease, you can serve those changes with a 30-day notice rather than having to wait to the end of that second fixed term. So for all of our leases, we have a fixed term initially, and then it goes month to month. Number 19, what happens if I decide to sell my property? Do I have to sell through your brokerage? Under the current regulations, unless the tenants give notice to vacate voluntarily, you do need to sell the property tenant occupied. There are a few other situations where you may be able to get around that. If that's something you're interested in, contact a real estate agent or a real estate attorney that is familiar with local rental laws to discuss your options. Do you have to sell through that brokerage? No. The one benefit that if you do sell through the brokerage that is managing your property is they have that history, that knowledge, and that relationship with those tenants and the property to best sell, market, and defend any price reductions or anything against your property. So that's something to keep in mind. Number 20, are you familiar with local rent and eviction control laws? What experience do you have? This is a phenomenal question. Each area in our Alameda County has different rules, different regulations. We at Advent Properties stay up to date on these rules and regulations. We consult with attorneys on a regular basis. We're part of the California Apartment Association, Rental Housing Association of Southern Alameda County, the San Francisco Apartment Association, you name it, we're a member of those groups. So we stay up to date so you don't have to. We advise you when the laws, the rules change and what needs to be done, what notices need to be served. In fact, the president of our company, Benjamin Scott, which Robert mentioned, is actually the longest standing rent board commissioner for the city of Oakland. So we take these laws, these rules very seriously. How does AB 1482, AB 3088, SB 91, and other new laws work? These are laws that have come into effect over the last 2 years that you need to be aware of. They each have different rules and regulations and requirements. And the Southern Alameda RHA can help you with that, as well as any professional property management firm. I'm going to go over these in more detail later on in this presentation. How long of a term is your management agreement? Is there an early termination clause? Most property managers have a 1-year term, just like a lease, on their property management service. For Advent Properties, after that 1-year term, it goes to a month-to-month agreement. Is there an early termination clause? In Advent Properties, yes. For other firms, you have to ask them specifically. I've never actually utilized that clause in our property management agreement, but it is there. We want to have a good working relationship with you, as you should want to have a good working relationship with us. So if the management is not working out, usually by mutual termination, we can end that agreement. And at Advent Properties, like I said, we've never utilized that early termination clause. Number 23, do your team members have specialized roles? Earlier, I mentioned compartmentalized versus portfolio style management. The main difference is for portfolio style management, the one person does everything for your property. They do the property management, the rent increases, the leasing, the accounting. At Advent Properties, we are a compartmentalized property management firm, meaning I have the best people doing what they do best. I have leasing specific team, I have a property management team, I have a maintenance team, and I have an accounting team. The benefit to you as a landlord is by having those people doing specific jobs, they are the best at what they do and they only focus on that one topic. The reason that's important, for instance, for leasing, we want your properties rented out as quickly as possible. My leasing assistants are available nights and weekends when people are actually available to tour properties. What I've heard from some portfolio type property managers is leasing is important to them, but if something comes up at one of their other properties, leasing is probably the least important of their items, and that often gets pushed to the side or delayed. So that's something that you want to ask a property manager. What style do they use, and do their teams have specialized roles? Everyone on our team is CCRM certified. We take that very seriously, and we make sure that our team members stay up to date and with the current rules and regulations so that you're always protected and we're serving your best interests. Number 24, are you knowledgeable about evictions and who covers the cost? As a property manager, yes, we have to be. I've personally done 56 evictions. I've won 54 of them. So we take it very seriously. Typically, the cost of the eviction is an owner cost. However, the property management firm will typically prepare all the documentation and represent you in court and work with the attorney for that unlawful detainer and advise you when it's necessary to proceed with that. It's even more challenging nowadays because of the eviction moratoria. So consult with a landlord attorney or with a property manager if you have eviction specific questions. And number 25 is, do you have references? Any good professional property management firm will be able to supply you with references for properties in the area where your property is located, as well as the similar type of property. So if you have a multifamily property, we will be able to provide you with a reference for another multifamily in the area that you specifically are located. And you actually want to call or reach out to those references and see how good we're doing. Another thing you can do is go on to Yelp or Google and look at the reviews on the different management firms. No management firm is going to have a perfect rating. We try our best, but life happens. You get upset tenants. Sometimes you get some upset owners. Most management firms take these reviews seriously, and we respond immediately to them to help resolve the situation. So that's just something to keep in mind. Next topic is going to be, what if I do not want to hire a property manager? These are things that you should be aware of and account for if you want to manage the property yourself. First of all, don't go it alone. Join the local associations, attend meetings like this and other webinars that they're presenting, stay up to date with local ordinance changes, use up-to-date documents. That's probably the most critical thing you can do. The lease and the documents you use are meant to protect you. Use the most current available document for your property. All of these laws, even the new ones coming out, do apply to you as a landlord, even a mom and pop landlord. You're not exempt from them. So stay up to date with the laws, the rules, regulations. Ignorance is no excuse. Set your rental standards and stick with them. The biggest thing I can tell you is write out your rental standards ahead of time. Put your standards in your advertising. Put those qualifications there and stick to them. Run a credit check on everyone that's applying, check their references, check their rental history. Some of the things that you should include is a minimum credit score, a minimum monthly income. We actually do it based on the number of people that are renting the property, what your deposit's gonna be, what your pet policies are gonna be. But the biggest thing you can do is make sure you follow these these standards, so that you do not get a fair housing claim against you. The best thing to do, like I said, is write them down and put them in your advertising and stick to them. Should you screen your tenants, employees, and vendors? Yes, always. For the residents, do a credit check, income verification, unlawful detainer action check, and check their references. You want qualified and verified tenants. You want to know who's living in your property, and you want to be able to manage them appropriately. Do not be swayed to make an exception for someone with a good story or a winning personality. Those are the times that you make these exceptions are the times that are going to come back to bite you, and will be oftentimes be the most challenging tenants you have to deal with. Stick to your standards. And once a bad tenant moves in, you're stuck. Especially now under COVID-19 eviction moratoria, it makes it much more challenging to get difficult tenants out of your property, particularly because of that eviction moratoria, but also because of the just cause ordinances. You have to have specific reasons to ask a tenant to vacate the property. Should you screen your employees and vendors? Yes. Once they're in, they have access to everything, whether it be the rental unit or your property management software, your documents. For employees, you should do a criminal background check on every employee. You should do a credit check on employees that will have access to banking or financial information. So accountants, anyone like that. The most important thing you can do for your property is have a good rental agreement. Use the most up-to-date lease, the most current addenda. Update these addenda annually. Update your lease whenever you have a vacancy. The most critical thing, you can have the best lease out there. If it's not filled out correctly and thoroughly, it's worthless. All the terms and conditions of your lease must be legal. If you have questions about how to fill out that lease, what is legal, what's not, contact a property manager, a landlord attorney, or organizations like RHA. Another thing to do is document. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. Document your leases, your rent increases, document any tenant complaints, maintenance requests, disputes, rule violations. If you receive a phone call about these, what we do is we document in our system, and then we often send a summary email back to the person making the complaint. So it's written down and time-stamped. If possible, take pictures. Almost everyone nowadays has an iPhone or a smartphone. Take pictures of the damage, of the vacant units, of rule violations. Store those with your tenant files, either in property management software or however you're storing your information. But that's the best thing you can do. Document everything. We take more notes on our tenants and what's going on at each property than anything. Next thing is maintain your property. A poorly maintained building or property attracts the wrong type of tenants, the wrong type of attention. If your building looks good and you take care of it, your tenants are more likely to take good care of their unit and the property. Make sure your tenants know that you want to hear about the maintenance and you want to hear about it sooner rather than later. Maintenance doesn't go away. It only gets more difficult and bigger problems and more expensive. So have that open line of communication with your tenants about maintenance needs. Should you raise your rents regularly? Yes, typically. However, under current COVID regulations or COVID circumstances, we advise owners to bank your rent increases currently until there's the vaccination is fully rolled out, until the economy is kind of recovered. That's a good faith thing, and it puts a good image of you with the tenants, that you care for them and want them to stay housed. If and when you go to sell your property, the partial value of your building is based on the income stream, the rents that are collected for the property. Over time, you want to do small incremental rent increases. You don't want to necessarily do a large lump sum increase. Based on the area you live in and the type of building you're in, you may not even be able to do those larger rent increases. You may be rent controlled or rent capped and how much you can do on an annual basis. So yes, you should raise your rents. Talk to a landlord or RHA about when and how you should do that and what's necessary to do that. So you follow all the rules, regulations, and laws. If you plan to terminate a tenancy, be careful. Talk to an attorney first. Do not talk to the tenant first. It's cheaper and easier to do it correctly from the beginning than risk being sued for an unlawful eviction action. Don't threaten a 30 or 60-day notice of termination before talking with an attorney. You may be subject to, like I said, the eviction moratoria, eviction restrictions, or the just cause ordinances for your specific city or area. There may be local processes that need to be followed. There may be relocation payments that are required. And if you cannot evict, you may need to negotiate a buyout agreement. And this can vary in how much it costs you, area to area, situation to situation. I advise always talk to a real estate attorney familiar with the local rental regulations before you even attempt this conversation with your tenants. Tenants are your customers. Treat them well. Communicate clearly and concisely with your residents. Let them know your rules and expectations. These should actually be laid out in your lease. Be nice. Treat your residents how you want to be treated. Treat them with dignity, respect, and courtesy. Even in conflict, they're much more likely to cooperate with you if they've been treated well and know that you have their best interest at heart. There are a few new laws that may impact your property. Here's the three of them that are most current. AB 1482, also known as the Tenant Protection Act of 2019. AB 3088, also known as the COVID-19 Tenant Relief Act, and SB 91. SB 91 actually just passed last week, and this is a Eviction Protection and Debt Relief Act. So I'm going to go through those in a little bit more detail right now. AB 1482 essentially makes all multifamily properties throughout the state of California that are not subject to a stricter rent control or just cause ordinance, subject to a rent cap and eviction or just cause ordinances. The rent cap varies county to county based on local CPI. It does max out how much rent you can raise for certain properties. Single family homes may be exempt from this law. There's a notice that needs to be served to exempt properties. If you haven't already done that, I would research it and see if you need to serve that notice. It is already delinquent, so I would suggest doing that research immediately. You can find out more about what rules and regulations are required for AB 1482 by going to CAA's website. I've included a link to it. On their website, they have a couple different flowcharts that you can go through and answer questions for your specific property to see if you are subject to the regulation and what you need to do and what notices do you need to serve. Your property may be subject to both the rent cap as well as the just cause ordinances. So do check into that. If you have specific questions on this, you can consult with CAA. You can consult with a landlord attorney familiar with the regulation as well. AB 3088 was passed in August of 2020, August 31st to be exact. This is known as the COVID-19 Tenant Relief Act of 2020. And this provided protections for evictions for residents unable to pay their rent and other charges from March 1st through January 31st, 2021 due to circumstances related to COVID-19. It extended the just cause protections of AB 1482 to all properties to January 31st. However, those have been extended as well since SB 91 just passed last week. Under AB 3088, I'm sorry, this is a little text heavy, but I wanted to get all the details out for you. You cannot evict a resident for non-payment of rent or other charges if they can provide a declaration of their finances have been negatively impacted by COVID-19. You're prohibited from evicting for non-payment between September 1st and January 31st of 2021. If they provide that declaration of their finances negatively impacted, and if they pay at least 25% of the rental payments due between that period. Landlords are required to provide an informational notice to any residents that have missed one or more payments from March 1st through August 31st of 2020. Instead of the standard 3-day notice, it requires that landlords give a 15-day notice before seeking to evict for any unpaid rent and other charges. This does not include weekends or judicial holidays, so it's actually a longer term. The best advice is if you are suffering from non-payment of rent, consult with an attorney for more specifics, and make sure you've served the appropriate notices to the tenants. A delinquent notice may be technically defective under the eyes of the court. Currently, the effectiveness is unknown if a court action is required, and notices for AB 38 were due back in September. SB 91 was passed just last week, on January 28th. It was signed into law by Governor Newsom, and this took effect immediately. The new law sets rules for the use of funds allocated under the $25 billion emergency rental assistance funding created by the Federal Consolidated Appropriation Act of 2021, or the federal stimulus bill passed by Congress on December 27th, 2020. Now say that 10 times fast. The biggest change for you is SB 91 extended that eviction moratoria through at least June 30th, 2021. Currently, I have a feeling that that's going to get extended even further as the COVID situation continues to evolve. If you're going to, landlords are required to send notice to the residents about the new law no later than February 28th, 2021. If you do not serve this notice, it may impact your ability to evict a resident who fails to pay or comply with the AB 3088 or SB 91. Everything is still getting updated for this. The California Apartment Association has created a form, the form CA 405, as of last week. So you can find that on the CAA website. This law is so new that more details are coming and how this impacts you and what it means. One of the other big changes with SB 91 is the California will pay up to 80% of back rent for low-income tenants between April 2020 and March 2021. In order to receive this IOU, landlords must agree to waive any remaining balance of the 20% and not pursue an unlawful or eviction on those tenants. Your participation as a landlord is voluntary. There's still questions about how you do this and who qualifies for this and who actually has to submit the application or the paperwork. Currently, as it's understood, household income has to be no more than 80% of area median income for the 2020 calendar year. At least one person must demonstrate a risk of being homeless due to either eviction notice, unsafe or unhealthy housing conditions, or other restrictions determined by the agency charged with dispersing the funds. At least one household member has either qualified for unemployment benefits or experienced a reduction in the household income as a consequence of COVID-19 or has incurred significant costs due to the pandemic. And households with income below 50% of the area median income will be the first in line. And A household member who has been unemployed for 90 days preceding the application for relief will also take precedence. As I mentioned, this law was passed just last week. There's more details coming about on a daily basis. My team member, William Lynn, the COO of Advent Properties, has partnered with Clifford Freed, a lawyer and partner at Freed and William LLP, a landlord attorney group in Oakland and San Francisco, and they'll be presenting a webinar on protecting rental income during COVID-19. This webinar is going to be held on February 10th at 10 a.m. If you would like information or to register, please send me an email at dglass@adventpropertiesinc.com, and I will get you connected with them. They're both very knowledgeable and are staying up to date with the current rules and regulations. If you're not familiar with it, Freed and Williams is probably one of the best well-known landlord attorneys in the Bay Area. So they'll take good care of you. So that ends most of my presentation. Is there questions? Let's see.
Hey,
Let me
Darryl,
check.
so I have a few questions written down so I can start going through them. And
Perfect.
then to all our attendees, if you have other additional questions, we will take those after these. But question, excuse me, Judy submitted this question. Do you charge a percent of the rental revenue? And if so, how do you charge if the tenant stops paying or reduces to 25% under current COVID law?
So yes, we do charge a percentage. The percentage is based on the number of units that you have. In our management agreement, it's based on the gross rent, the total rent, not just the collected rent. And the reason for that is we are working even harder for you when the tenants are not paying to try and work with the tenants to get them paying and up to date, as well as serving all the appropriate notices to protect you and hopefully get you your rental income back up to the lease amount.
Awesome, cool. Another question that came in, excuse me, I am thinking about linking PM fee, i.e. maybe 1% bonus given based on NOI goal achieved. Is this arrangement make sense?
So that's a case-by-case basis. I'd need more details in order to adequately answer that question.
Okay, so that came from Chunich. I can unmute you if you want to follow up on that.
Or if you want to talk about this offline, my
Yeah,
email is right there.
why don't
As
you?
is my phone number. You can call me or email me and we can talk about this in more detail.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. The same person asked, is now Zillow more efficient in finding good quality tenant versus Craigslist?
No. And that's just my personal opinion. In our area, Craigslist is probably still the most researched website for rentals. You want to be careful though. There are companies out there that are trying to put up fraudulent ads or rent out spaces that are not yours. We actually watermark our photos so we know that they're truly Advent listings and not someone trying to rent out a space. One way to protect yourself is, like I said, we require that everyone tour the space with one of our leasing assistants, or if you're managing yourself, and tour it with you before you even accept an application. That's the first qualification standard, that they show up and that they are a real person and not just someone online.
Awesome.
Zillow is still, their goal is to make money, and they have done a good job at it, but they're not, I don't think they're the best at doing the rental, either advertising. It is one of the sites we advertise on, but it's not the most linked to website in our experience.
Okay, cool. And Patricia Cooper, I spoke to Patricia Cooper this morning. Hey, Patricia. She is asking you, how many units does each of your managers handle?
So we are compartmentalized. So I have 3 property managers, specific property managers, and they oversee all approximately 900 units. But Like I said, we've got maintenance managers, leasing assistants, and accounting as well. So although that sounds like a lot for the management team, all they're focused on is the actual property management, rent increases, notices, communication. They're not doing maintenance requests. They're not doing the leasing or the leasing showing, the leasing advertising. They're solely focused on your property management needs.
Awesome. And then one more question that came out of chat, and then there's two hands that are raised. Okay, Darryl.
Okay.
Do we need to send CAA 405 form to all tenants before February 28th, or just those tenants who own back rent? And we want to recover 80% of those back rents.
My understanding is it's only to those tenants that have missed a payment since March 1st of 2020. In order to, it's still up in the air whether the property manager, the owner, or the tenant is responsible for serving the notices for SB 91. The lawyers are doing research on that. From my understanding, the law was not clearly written ahead of time on who can actually apply for that 80% relief.
So, as I think I told you, Darryl, before we started today, I was on a 2-hour webinar last week about SB 91, and there's still a lot that's going to be coming out of that. But I wanted to let those callers know that are on our webinar today. Definitely reach out to Darryl and sign up for their upcoming webinar. Look for RHA to do something in the future, as well as inform the membership once we know that the application process is available, and you can all go to that site and fill out that form. There are two people that had their hand raised. I want to get to them first, and I'm going to unmute Ramona Chang. Thank you for being so patient, Ramona. And I'm going to go ahead and unmute your line, okay?
I'm sorry, Robert. I didn't have a question. I probably just hit the wrong button. I find this very interesting, though.
Well, thank you,
Awesome.
Ramona.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And then Kathy, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. You have a question, so accept the unmuting, okay?
I'm still muted.
Nope, you're there. You're there.
Oh, here I am. Wow. I have so many questions, and I don't want to take up time. I've written them all down concisely, and I just like to ask Darryl if I can give you a call and we can have a talk.
Yes, my number is listed on the screen right now. Feel free to give me a call,
I will do
and
soon.
we can set up a time to talk.
Thank you.
And there will, Kathy and everyone else, there will be, Darryl has said he will send out his slides to me, so I'll send those out to all of you, as well as make this recording available to everyone, okay? There is another question in chat from YT. If there's a resident manager on premise, what's the resident manager's role?
So again, that's a case-by-case basis. A resident manager or on-site supervisor, as we like to call them, are necessary if your building is 16 units or more in the state of California. For us, if we have an on-site supervisor, we don't call them resident managers. They live on the property. They do a weekly inspection of the property. They may do light cleaning of the property, walking the hallways, sweeping, vacuuming. They may take the trash cans in and out. Really, you can set what is and what is not their responsibility. You do want to have a separate agreement with them. You won't have to have an employment agreement. You have to pay them a minimum wage. The apartment cannot be their sole benefit for living on the property. If you have specific questions on that, I recommend that you consult with an employment attorney or look at the CAA website for their on-site manager agreements. There is a checklist of items in that agreement that you can do and share with the on-site supervisor. The other thing that I was going to say about this is you want to have them have a license to occupy. You do not want them to have a lease. The reason for that is if it's a license to occupy and you need to terminate them, you can actually ask them to leave the property within whatever your guidelines are in your contract. If they're on a lease and you have to terminate their services, they may still be able to reside on the property. They just will not be the on-site supervisor anymore. That's a case-by-case basis based on the city and the just cause ordinances that your property is subject to.
Awesome. V Nguyen has a question, and he wanted to know if you assist in getting non-permit units permitted.
So most property managers are just that, property managers. We're not project managers. That is more of a project management situation, and we can provide references or referrals to a project manager that can assist you with that type of process. It can be very challenging depending on the city and their requirements, and they may require you to take everything out and start over fresh to make it a legal habitable unit with a certificate of occupancy. Some cities are making it easier than others, but again, that's a case-by-case basis depending on the city.
Awesome. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions in chat, and I'm sure nobody would mind being let go 5 minutes early from class. Darryl, oh my gosh, this was so informative. Even for me, I'm so new to the industry myself. So I want to thank you on behalf of RHA, and I'm sure also thank you on behalf of everyone on our webinar today. Please remember, everyone, that we will send out the slides. We will send out a recording. As a matter of fact, let me stop the recording. That's a good thing.